Okay, so first off, pleasure to meet you all, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for taking the time today. My name is Ian Horsburgh, and I'm a director and private client advisor here at Henley & Partners. Excited to move on to the topic of elite university tactics. However, please bear with me for just a few minutes so I can provide you with an overview of Henley & Partners. Okay, so if we could move to the next slide, there we go. There are three sides to our business. Okay, so private client advisory on investment migration, that's the name of the game. So residence or citizenship by investment. And we work with over 30 countries who are looking to attract foreign direct investment in exchange for citizenship or residence. The second side of our business is government advisory. Okay, so we worked with governments such as the UK, Swiss, and Thai governments when it comes to designing, implementing, and marketing their investment migration mandates or programs. We've generated over $10 billion in foreign direct investment for these countries. And the third, new to our suite of tools, if you wish, is education advisory. Okay, so you'll meet the team today and find out a little bit more about the offering. So if we can move on to the next slide, please. Okay, so this reflects our worldwide coverage as the global leader in investment migration with the largest footprint in the industry. You can see here we have over 40 offices worldwide to pull together that kind of cohesive wealth management plan, if you wish. We're just a piece of the puzzle. Quite often I'm sitting at a table with an education advisor, a tax advisor, a lawyer, and a private banker to ensure everything's aligned. And finally, I thought just a couple of case studies on how investment migration can add value. Okay, first, let's say you're a businessman with or woman with a business interest in Dubai. You can then look to diversify your investment portfolio or even property portfolio into the UAE. Okay, on the back of that, you'll be granted a 10-year residence visa throughout the UAE. So that really opens up the UAE from a business point of view. You're not limited to time as a tourist. Okay. And the next case study, you know, you're British and your retirement plans in the Costa del Sol have been scuppered by Brexit. Well, if you purchase your dream investment holiday on the coast in Barcelona, it can lead to you being European residents via the investment migration program there, or the golden visa. And then you're not restricted by the current 90-day rule as a tourist. Okay, so another way that we can, you know, work with you to add value. And finally, from an education point of view, let's say your child is planning to go to university in Australia, and that's their aspiration. We'll advise on whether Australia is the right country and which university is the right fit for your child. What a lot of people don't understand is that on a temporary student visa, your time on the ground doesn't contribute towards naturalizing and becoming a PR or a citizen in Australia when you're on a temporary student visa. If your child is there on a long-term investor visa, then their time on the ground does contribute. It means that they have the flexibility to remain after their studies. Okay, so your child goes to Australia, or this applies to the US, and Canada, and the UK. You know, they study a master's and they can graduate as a permanent resident or even a citizen. So there's many ways that we can work together on your family plan to really add value. Okay, now I think that's enough for me. My details are at the end. We will be hosting a Q&A session at the end as well. So if you could save your questions to the end, and we'll pass over to Tess now for some introductions and give you a chance to meet the rest of the team.
Great, right. Thanks so much, Ian. That's really kind. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are. Thanks for joining us today for what promises to be a really informative webinar delivered by experts in their field. International education is a wonderful gift that you can offer your children. However, navigating its complexities can be challenging. Henley and Partners Education works with families to ensure that their child receives wraparound support while they explore the different options open to them. You ensure that your children, by working with our team, who are expert, impartial, they really know the geographical areas that they are focusing on, then you can ensure that your children are placed in universities that suit their academic and professional and personal objectives. Today, you're going to hear from three of our team, David Hawkins, Sarah Alakaija, and Stefan Watts, and they will share invaluable information about the application strategies for the US, Canada, UK, and Australia. There is a lot to cover, so we expect this webinar to last around 45 minutes. It is being recorded, so in case you don't manage to hear everything, you will be able to get copies of the recording. As Ian said, we're going to have a Q&A at the end. However, please do drop questions in the chat throughout, because if it's relevant, we'll see if we can answer them. But first of all, and without further ado, I just want to introduce our three speakers. So you'll hear from David first. He's an experienced college and university guidance counsellor and has expertise in a wide range of international university admission systems. A graduate of the University of Oxford and a former GCSE, IGCSE, A-level and IB history teacher, David has served as a college counsellor in the UK and internationally supporting students and university applications to the United States, UK, Canada, Asia and Europe. David provides independent counselling services to students and families around the world, particularly those looking for support in the applications of the countries mentioned earlier. He was previously head of college and careers counselling at the International School of Brussels and head of careers at Taunton School. David has served as a member of the Council of International Schools Guidance Committee and its Committee for Europe, the Middle East and Africa, as well as the Government Relations Committee of the International Association for College Admissions Counselling. As you can hear, highly qualified. He hosts a University Guide podcast and is a popular speaker and author on all aspects of university applications from an international perspective. Now, Sarah, who you'll hear from afterwards and will be speaking about the UK in particular, worked in independent schools between 1997 and 2020 in a variety of roles, including vice principal and head of careers, HE, and entrepreneurship. Most recently, she worked with a leading London independent girls' day school, heading up an award-winning careers department. She's undertaken consultancy work for a number of independent day and boarding schools in the UK, including an HMC boarding school and international schools in Malaysia and Turkey. She was educated at the University of Cambridge, where she read law. She's highly experienced with applications to Oxford and Cambridge and has authored 4 editions of the Trotman Guide, Getting into Oxford and Cambridge. Sarah is aware of how important it is that parents feel informed about the application process and has given a number of presentations to help parents find their way through the maze of the UCAS system and the personal statement. In addition, she presents engaging workshops to students, helping them to prepare the best application to university, as well as helping teachers, both in the UK and abroad, to construct references for their children and their students. Lastly, Stefan, you'll hear from Stefan. He will be talking about Australia. Stefan is a leading UK-based education consultant and has worked for over 20 years with families from all over the world, supporting students with applications to institutions throughout Australia. As a former international student in Australia, he has first-hand knowledge of the education opportunities in Australia and regularly visits institutions. He's a trustee of a children's charity, the Foundation for Children. So that gives you an overview of our speakers for today. And without further ado, I'm going to hand over to David, who's going to start with by far the most complicated of them all, the US. David.
Thank you so much, Tess. Thank you for that lovely introduction. It's really nice to be with you all today. As Tess has framed there, the US is by far the world's most complicated admission system. And so I'm going to try and give what I can in 20 minutes or so about the US and Canada, what's really only scratching the surface. With the US, what we've really got to understand is that unlike admission systems in almost every other country around the world, we're playing a different game. It is a different thing to other places. And exactly the same way as in most parts of the world, you said to someone, hey, what's football? You would get a different answer if you said, hey, what's football to an American? If you say, how do I apply to university? What do I do at university? Even what is the point of university? We get a different answer in America than we do in other places. So we're playing a different game. We have to know different rules. If we move forward to the next slide, I'm going to pack this in a little bit more detail. The reason why America is so different from every other place is that you're actually not applying for the same thing. Now, that might sound a little bit odd because, well, I'm applying to university, but let me unpack that. When we're applying to universities in all the other countries you're hearing about today, we're applying to be a student on a course. Now, that might be a fairly broad course of study, like a Bachelor of Arts or Bachelor of Commerce, so it might be something really specific, like aerospace engineering or computer science and AI. But in the US, we're actually applying for something much broader than just a single course of study. We're applying for membership of a community. So if you move through the next slide, we can see how that really is very different from what we're used to in the UK and many other countries. In the UK model, you'll hear from Sarah about, we're applying to that subject. And so your degree is going to all be classes in that subject. It might be a joint honours degree, it might be slightly broader, but it's a bit like a set menu when you go out for a dinner at a restaurant. You've kind of pre-ordered it before you turn up. Now, when we're applying to a US degree, we're applying to a curriculum that is going to be much, much broader in terms of your studies. So whereas a student may be studying history in the UK or Europe or other places would have almost all, if not all of their classes in history, a student in the US will find that they're probably only spending a third of their time over their course or their degree studying that history course. Well, what are they doing with the rest of it? Well, a large chunk of it will be things a university forces students to study. And almost every US university will ensure that over their time at university, the student is having to study classes that tick off a range of requirements. They'll have to study English literature, foreign language, maths, sciences, the humanities, the social sciences, the arts, and actually in many cases also physical education. Then on top of that, they can fill in the gaps between them with what are called elective classes, where they can just take a bunch of interesting things and maybe combine those into a double major or more likely a minor. So compared to the set menu style, this is more like a buffet. I will get admitted to the university in general and then pick and mix my own pathway through it. Now, because therefore it's not admission to a course, it's admission to the university, we then have the complications that make the US such a confusing place. On the next slide, we can look a little bit more detail on this. This, for example, is the curriculum you would study if you admitted to Harvard. We're not applying to Harvard as an engineer, computer scientist, an artist, or a historian. We're applying to Harvard to study this curriculum. And you can see again the 3/3 of it. The bits in red defined by the university, the bits in green, your area of focus, what Harvard calls its concentration, the blue, your ability to have free choice within it. And so you're not saying, I'm going to Harvard to study a defined course. It's just, I'm going to Harvard. And in my second year, I will pick an area of focus, but that's still not going to be an exclusive area of study. And this is the common experience across US universities. Now, the next slide will then explain in a bit more detail about then going about this. We can't be saying, well, I want to go to this university to study this subject. What we have to talk about with the US is fit. Like a nice jacket or a nice new pair of shoes, we're looking for a process whereby you fit everything the university offers. And strategically, you therefore need to be applying to universities that fit you or your child in this process. Now, that fit is beyond just the academic subject. It's all these wider things of the teaching and assessment culture of that university. But it's also looking at how you fit the community. Where is it? What mission does it have? Does it have a religious element to it? And also how you fit the other kind of students who join your class that you are expected to stay in touch with, not just for your time at university, but for the years and years and years afterwards. Americans refer to their university as their alma mater. It means their other mother, just showing this importance of being a fit for the experience, and the university's in admissions looking for students who fit them. Now, if we scroll forwards, then what does this actually then really delve into? Well, we can look at two very famous elite US universities and just see how different the cultures are. I've taken from the current application the questions that you would have to answer if your child was applying to these two universities. I've paraphrased them slightly. You can see for the University of Southern California, quite genuinely, students are writing essay responses to questions like, if your life had a theme song, what would it be? What would be your dream trip? Now, that's a very different culture to the questions you see here from Yale. You are teaching a new Yale course. What is it called? If you could invite somebody to come and give a talk in an evening in your college, what would it be? A Yale student is therefore a different kind of student to a USC student. And so beyond just the academics and the level of university, the universities are putting these questions out there to figure out what is your character? What are your values? Not, are you really good at the subject you want to study? On the next slide, then, we can then delve into the fact that this is possibly not just a nice thing to have. This is fundamentally essential given the levels of competition we're looking at in the USA. This is a tweet that Harvard put out in 2022, talking about the data from their recent admissions cycle. They were looking to make about 2,000 offers. For anyone in the world, about 2,000 offers available to study at Harvard. Just from America, 8,000 students applied to Harvard with a perfect grade point average. If that's not a term you're aware of, that basically means that through their last 4 years of high school, these students have not dropped a mark. They have a perfect academic achievement. And Harvard are looking at this and saying, we've got 4 times as many of those just from America, forget even the internationals, than we can fit. So this idea of your match for the character, community, and values of the university is fundamental to the elite university process, because you can't just go, I've got stellar grades, of course Harvard's going to love me. They really want to know that you are putting a coherent application together on top of that academic curriculum. Can you scroll forward to me, please, Tess? So what we've got to understand is the level of competition in the US is significantly more than in all the other destinations we're talking about. American universities at the elite end are tiny compared to other places. And this data shows you can see only 32,000 students are educated in total as undergraduates, the top 5 US universities. See Canada at the other end. So we are not talking about easy places to get into. And so the level of work that you have to do to strategize for the top US universities is going to be significantly more complicated. The next slide also unpacks this in a little bit more detail. There are 4.3 million students leaving school in America each year. So not only are the universities super small, that actually what makes an elite student in the US context is going to have to be significantly more, because the top 1%, those 43,000 students, don't actually numerically fit into those listed universities you see there with only 9,300 spots. So it's a significantly harder place to secure a spot at an elite university than in other destinations. Moving forwards, then we've got to understand, how do you go about doing this? Well, the first thing is to really completely, to a very high level of detail, know what you're applying for. That idea of the curriculum you're going for. And there are different models. Harvard is different from Brown. Columbia is different from Dartmouth. UCLA is different from Stanford. Understand actually, what am I applying for? And build a list of universities that is the same. If you're just shopping for the name brand, you're just going after the Ivies, you're actually not applying for similar curriculum structures, and it's therefore very hard to put a coherent application together. But also then understand that, unlike in the other destinations you're going to hear about today, the identity of the university and the campus and community life is also a factor in the admissions process. And then link that to what you as an applicant want to show. How do your academic backgrounds, subject interests, and future plans match the curriculum style? How does your own personal identity match the identity of the universities you're applying to? And how do your life experiences, the things that you have done, match the campus community you want to go to? And this is where I'm afraid we see a lot of really talented students make mistakes when looking at the top US universities, is that what they're applying for is very different kinds of curriculums, or very different identities, or very different campus lives. And therefore, it's almost impossible to put together a compelling application when you're applying for wildly different experiences. So matching what you already have and aspire to with a list of universities out there is crucial. I mean, you might look at Harvard and think that is not the right option for me. A good reason for that might be you aspire to study business at a US university. Harvard doesn't teach business at the undergraduate level. In fact, only 2 of the Ivy League universities do study business. So if your focus about your academics and identity experience is a business aspiration, then you would be focusing at one particular type of elite US universities. But if you were sending a business-focused application to all the Ivies, expect to be denied by them all because you really haven't matched these 2 things together. Can we scroll on, please, Tess? So in order to make a success of this, as you're seeing in it, my fundamental piece of advice is give yourself enough time. As you will hear, that nothing else on the planet is as complicated as US applications. And so there really has to be a sequence of events working forwards, where it's going to take you a lot longer at the start to build your college list and your application strategy, and then to work through things like connecting with universities, sitting for an admissions test if you need them, getting out to the States and visiting colleges, something that Henley and Partners can help with, and then the sheer volume of application writing that students will have to do. So it's an amazing system out there in the US, but it is not for the faint-hearted. And if you really aspire to go to America, the sooner you start, the better. Okay, moving on. Canada is nothing like as complicated, but it is an option that if you are or your child is attracted to the American university system, is one I would very much encourage you to introduce, because it gets a lot of that experience that you would have in the US without some of the complexities that come into it. The degree is broader than what we would see in that UK, but it's not quite as broad as we would have in the United States. But we get that American style campus culture. You can go and see the big game. You do have the cheerleaders. We do get all that stuff that children have seen in the movies and on Netflix shows. But there are systemic things that make it easier. The application procedure is really very straightforward. You've seen the statistic on just how big Canadian universities like McGill here are, and therefore the outcomes are very predictable. It's also worth noting that it's about half the price of studying in Canada compared to the US, which the US at the top end right now is $92,000 US a year tuition movement board. You're looking at half of that in Canada. On the next slide, I'll explain a little bit about why it is a little bit more straightforward. In Canada, we're not applying for a subject. We're not applying for history or French or classics. We're equally not applying just to join the institution. We're applying into a general program of study. And this is something, again, you'll hear a little bit more later on for other countries. You pick typically one of these. There are other things like Bachelor of Fine Arts and Bachelor of Nursing, but most international students will be going to one of these 4 areas. So a student who's interested in the arts and humanities doesn't have to say, oh, I like history, or I like French, or I like classics. It's just, I like the arts and humanities. So the university just needs to know that you are generically good at the arts and humanities. And so all they're looking to see is a high school credential you present with. So the IB, A levels, French bac, Gaokao, whatever that might be, shows that you have the right level of academics in the subjects you want to do. So a Bachelor of Arts degree will typically want one of those high school diplomas with some specialisms in the arts and humanities. A Bachelor of Science will want maths and a science. A Bachelor of Engineering will want maths and physics. A commerce degree will want maths. And as long as you show that I've got that, I'm good at it to the level of the university, you're likely going to be admitted, because they'll figure out when you get into that Bachelor of Arts degree, which one you like. And in your first year, you might take history and French and classics and 4 or 5 other things. And then in year 2, decide which one you want to specialize in, which will normally fill half of your curriculum going forwards. The scientists, you don't need to pick chemistry or biochemistry or maths or computer science or physics. You just get there, try a lot and figure it out. And so this is why the admission system is so simple and the outcomes are very predictable, because they're postponing some of the more specific decisions for later. But equally, they don't need to know, do you like music? Do you want to watch TV? Or are you really interested in traditional academics? They just need to know your grade profile. We scroll forwards, please, Tess. Oh, one more again, please. There we go. So the subject prerequisites will be the filter that we have to looking for. You can go onto all sorts of Canadian websites. For example, UBC has it there. What is my child currently studying? How does that match the Canadian curriculum? And then are they eligible? And for most universities, about 80% of Canadian universities, that's it, you'll be admitted. For the more popular universities, the ones that are selective, they'll then be saying, okay, now you're eligible. How do you stack up to everybody else? And for big popular qualifications like the IB, the universities will say, this is what you need to be eligible. But last year, this was the grade level that typically got you in. So very clear, very transparent, and very predictable. Next slide, please. The application systems are very straightforward. The only complexity is that there are different application systems depending where in Canada the universities are. If it's in Quebec, you apply directly. If it's in Ontario, like here, Toronto, you apply through a system called OUAC. If it's British Columbia, you apply BC. Typically very straightforward. My record for an application is 30 minutes from start to finish for a student applying to McGill last year. So really not very complicated in terms of moving forwards with this. I think there may be one more slide, or perhaps that was the last one. No. So America is amazing, super complicated, but wonderful opportunities to start earlier. Canada is a bit of a hidden gem. And if you are maybe coming to this a little bit late, or you have a child and you think that American stuff seems a bit full on, definitely consider Canada. Thank you so much for your attention. I look forward to answering questions later on.
Thanks, David. So we're going to pass over to Sarah now, who's going to give you all the information you need about applying and successfully applying to top UK universities. Again, very different to the US. Sarah, over to you.
Thanks, Tess. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to give you all the information you need, but I'm definitely going to try and give you as much as possible in 10 to 15 minutes. And as David has said, the UK system is incredibly different to the US in terms of the application process and on arrival. And there are almost certainly no cheerleaders in the UK, so we can forget that one. Okay, so if we can go to the first slide, please, Tess. So my key theme, I mean, as time is short, I had to sort of try to pick the key messages that I would want to put to you. And the key one is to start early. As I put there, it's a marathon, it's not a sprint. As David has said, this is very different to the US in that your application and your time at university is hugely subject focused. You need to choose your degree subject first. It really is the most important thing. Your character, the institution's character, all that sort of thing is not the most important part of the application with the UK. In terms of choosing your degree subject and getting that done early, there are, on the whole, students will study only one subject in the UK universities, but there are exceptions to that. There are some joint courses where you would study a couple of subjects together, maths and physics, for example, English with history. There are subjects such as PPE, politics, philosophy and economics. There are some combined honours courses and some liberal arts courses. These are a reasonably new event, let's say, in the UK system, and are becoming a little bit more popular as we go forward. The Scottish system is also something to just think about as well in terms of degree subjects, where you will apply for just one degree subject, but you're actually asked to study another two, usually alongside that, of your own choice, which gives you a little bit of flexibility. You would study those two for the first couple of years and then major in one of them for your final couple of years. So in terms of our marathon, that's really the first thing to do. Choose the degree subject and then look at which universities have the courses that you want within that subject. We would then move on to looking at supercurricular work, which I'm going to go into in great depth as we go forward because of the importance of your subject choice. You would then look at writing your personal statement. You may be aware that the personal statement is a very short application essay, and calling it an essay is probably stretching the definition of the word essay, to be honest with you. It is a 500-ish word document explaining why you are interested in applying to read the subject that you're applying for. After that, we do the application. And similar to what David has said about the Canada application form itself, the British application form is also quite simple itself. The preparation in order to make that a simple process is more complicated. But you apply through UCAS central system, applying to all of the universities. You apply for a maximum of 5, unless you're applying for medicine, where it's a maximum of 4 for that particular course. So let's move on to the next slide. So I've been asked to sort of focus on the most competitive universities, and obviously it would be remiss of me not to mention Oxford, Cambridge, what a lot of people I know call the G5, Oxford, Cambridge, Imperial, UCL, LSE. I mean, we'll start with Oxbridge. I just really have got this slide up here to show you that it is slightly more complex as a process than other universities. And that is in part because of the additional requirements, such as admissions tests, which are sadly very much up in the air at the moment over here, but we will have hopefully some confirmation of what's going on with those soon. But admissions tests are a huge part of Oxford and Cambridge application process, and interviews, sending in of written work as well after the application, followed by, of course, as I said, interviews and then finally decisions. So that process in itself can take 4 to 6 months. And you'll see that this slide begins in June. This has come from the Oxford's own website. Prior to this process here of starting to write your application in June, you really need to be spending a good, in my opinion, 12 months considering Oxford and Cambridge and exploring your subject choice. Okay, so next slide, please, which reiterates really what I've just said, that is starting even earlier for an Oxbridge application. My most successful Oxbridge applicants have known the subject that they've wanted to study for at least 18 months before they've started and come to see me, really. That's not to say you absolutely can't be successful if you haven't made a decision early on. But knowing early on, I think, reflects the level of passion for the subject, which is what Oxford and Cambridge want to see. I was told by a Cambridge admissions officer once that what she wanted to see in an interview was the light behind the eyes of students when they talked about their subject, that their eyes literally lit up when they spoke about their subject. I think in order to have that, you probably need to have been involved in the subject, not necessarily at school, but involved in the subject through reading or doing activities related to it for a reasonable amount of time. Starting early also means that what you can do is when you're in years 10, 11 or equivalents, year 9 even, you can begin to map out your academic path towards an application to one of the most competitive universities by choosing suitable options, be it in IB, be it at A level, be it even at GCSE level. So for example, if we know that economics is going to be a subject that you would like to study at university, we can ensure that you are going to choose the right A level or IB subjects, i.e. maths. And the right kind of maths if it's IB. For example, for economics, you don't need to even study economics at A level to get into somewhere as strong as LSE for economics, but the requirement is that you have extremely strong maths grades. So things like that. That's why starting so early can be so helpful. Psychometric tests can help us as well. Henley have their aptitude test, which is super helpful in terms of helping us to see what subjects might be suitable for you, where your skills are, where your strengths are, etc. Also, if we begin thinking about these things early enough, we can look into subjects within the school subjects that we're studying. What do I mean by that? For example, you might be studying geography and enjoy the environmental side of it. Now, we may then have someone who goes on to become interested in environmental science as a subject at university. In biology, for example, again, human biology may become an area of expertise and joy for that student. So once again, starting early. Okay, next slide, please, Tess. Thank you very much. Just reiterating my message again, timelines here. So this is just a suggested timelines. Obviously, some of these are deadlines, but some of this is suggested timelines. So if this was someone going for 2025 entrance, we would have been having our discussions on subjects in the summer and autumn of last year, finalising right now, absolute final decisions done. And for basically spending the whole of the spring, the summer term and the summer doing our supercurricular work, which I will go into. Okay, so I'll just leave that there for you, and we'll move on to the next slide. Okay, David spoke about fit for US universities, whether you fit the character of the institution and whether it fits you. There is, to a certain extent, that same question needs to be asked about Oxford and Cambridge specifically, but it's not quite the same fit. It is an academic fit. It's not necessarily a personality fit. It is hard work going to Oxford and Cambridge. I'm certainly not saying it isn't to go to anywhere else, but it really is hard work. You're talking a 30, 40, 45-hour working week for most of the subjects. You're talking a lot of independent study. Are you that kind of student? Can you cope without somebody on your back every day? Do you love your subject enough to do the independent study? We go back to starting early and choosing your degree subject. You will be given tasks. So I'll give you an example. When I did law at Cambridge, I would be asked to do 5 essays per fortnight, and all I would be given would be a title and a reading list of probably around 25 books to look at. Not reading the entire book, but looking at what was in there. And then I would be told, bye-bye, see you in 2 weeks. Now, if that's not you, if you can't deal with that, I'm not quite sure how I did manage, but anyway, I did. It's not quite right. On the other side, that all sounds quite negative. Hopefully it doesn't, but it may sound negative. The collegiate system is incredibly supportive. You're part of a small community, 300, 400, 500, 600 students, depending on the size of your college, and with really strong pastoral support. So that's something to think about. Is it right for you? Okay. I think the other thing to think about in terms of whether it's right for you is do they do the subjects that are right for you? Of course, if you want to study economics, if you're going to go for Oxford, you're going to have to study it with management. Is that what you want? Don't just do it because you have to. You have to enjoy management. It's a significant part of that course. So again, is that right for you? Or will you be better off with economics at Cambridge? Is medicine are these places right for you if you want to study medicine, for example? Potentially not if you don't want to have the traditional style of teaching where you're not allowed to touch anyone human for a good few years. It's all the book learning before you do the practical stuff. That might not be right for you. So there is this idea that Oxford and Cambridge are best for everything. They're not best for everyone. I think that's the key. Okay, and the next slide. So bit of a reality check. I mean, again, we're not talking the same competition as some of the US Ivies, but we're talking about universities which are somewhat limited by their size because they are ancient universities in quite small towns and can't particularly grow very much. But the number of applications are growing, the number of places is fairly much staying the same. So the competition is just getting bigger and bigger. So your chances are slim. 1 in 5, 1 in 6 chance. That is an overarching stat. There's a lot more in there. It's a lot more nuanced than that. There are differences between colleges, differences between courses, differences between nationalities in terms of the statistics of who is admitted. And then on the next slide, just for balance, I popped in another university so that I'm not accused of being elitist. There's Imperial College as well, with their sort of application stats over the last 4 years or so. Little bit of a brighter picture than Oxford and Cambridge, but not that much, to be honest. Okay, and the next slide, please. So, particularly when we're talking about Oxford, Cambridge, Imperial, LSE, all the other people will have excellent grades. When you look at the statistics of the outcomes of students who've successfully applied and gone to Oxford, Cambridge, Imperial, LSE, the actual grades that they come out with are superb at A-level, IB, etc. So how do you, if those are the predictions that all those students have, how do you stand out in that crowd of brilliance? So these are the things that you can control within your application and that we can help you with. So we have the admissions test, the personal statement, interviews, references, and a big serving of critical analysis to be evident within the aspects of the application that you can show that, i.e. really the personal statement and the interview. Your ability to show that you have an opinion is vital for the more competitive universities. So your reference will reflect obviously how your teachers see you. So that's incredibly important. So you need to be nice to your teachers. They have quite a significant role to play in your application. Admissions test, that is a whole webinar of itself, to be honest with you. It is variable between subjects and between universities. Most of them are skills based, particularly when STEM subjects, STEM admissions tests will be skills based mostly. The arts and humanities admissions test will be a little bit more knowledge based. These are, again, something that you do have control over. Your personal statement and your interview, all your supercurricular preparation, which I'm going to harp on about a little bit later, will feed into your personal statement and your interview. Okay, and that personal statement is where you really can shine hugely on a very personal level. Okay, next slide, please. So in your preparation, focusing on supercurricular work above everything else is the evidence to the universities that you are open-minded. You love this subject. You have the impetus to go outside of the work that you do in school, perhaps on the subject, if it is a school subject, to go and find your own information, do your own research on the subject. That's how much you like it. That shows your independence and your curiosity. Okay, and the next slide, we'll have a look at what is supercurricular. So I will often have students confuse the two, supercurricular and extracurricular. A colleague of David's once we did a presentation together, and he talked about helping old ladies across the road and how in the US, they do care about whether you're the sort of person, the sort of student who would help old ladies to cross the road. And that would be shown in your extracurricular. Do you volunteer? Do you do charity work? Are you a giving, kind character? Unfortunately, in the UK, they don't care what you do with that old lady, whether she needs help or not. She could get run over by a bus, quite frankly, according to the UK university admissions tutors. They just seem to not care about that side of you. I am sorry to say, slightly embarrassed to say, to be honest. But that was quite a good analogy to show the difference between, why supercurricular and extracurricular are so different and why supercurricular is more important. They don't care about the character side, they only care about the academic side. So we're talking, are you reading books? Are you looking at journals, magazine articles? Are you looking at lectures, going to physical lectures or watching them online? Entering essay competitions, listening to podcasts, anything linked to that subject to which you're applying. Okay, I would probably add on to that summer schools as well, academic-based summer schools. Okay, and then on to the next slide. Here are just a few kind of ideas in terms of reading and reinforcing the idea that you need to be reading and thinking critically. So not just listing, these are the books I've read, but actually, here's a book I read about a topic I'm interested in, and I disagreed with one of the theories. I'd do it this way. That's what we're looking for. That's what the universities want to see. They want to see us also thinking outside the box. So all universities, almost all universities, offer reading lists, suggested reading that you might do in preparation. Everybody has access to those. Think outside the box a little bit. So when I speak with my students, I try to find out what they are interested in and offer them bespoke suggestions on that. We're thinking outside the box. We don't want to just be told what to do. So where are your interests? Read what you want to read. The number of times I've seen students start to write about books like Free Economics, for example, because it's on every reading list in the country. But we need to be a little bit more original than that. Okay, and the next slide, sorry, I'm rushing through. Few more suggestions here of specifics where you might find some resources to research the subject a little bit more. Look at finding connections between subjects that you're studying at school and the ones that you're applying for example. think actively, ask lots of questions of what you're reading, what you're doing. Don't worry about things like watching TV, watching documentaries. If you're applying for law, watch documentaries on police procedure. That's fine. That's okay to keep your interest going. But then we need to go a level higher once we've piqued our interest. And then the final slide. Oh, look, it's also about supercurricular as well, because there's just nothing more important I can say, really. What I would say is this: all the time that you spend, whether it's working with me or whether it's working alone, doing this preparation, reading these books, entering these essay competitions, listening to these podcasts, etc., being quizzed for your opinion, reflecting on what you've done, agreeing, disagreeing, etc., it is not only preparing you for your degree, it is preparing you to write a strong personal statement which evidences your interest, and it is also preparing you for the interview. It is loading your mind up with a foundational knowledge of the subject from which you can draw at interview, depending on what questions you're asked. So it's all linked. You're not just preparing for a personal statement, then you prepare for an interview. It's all linked together. So although it may at times seem like a lot of work, it's all worth it. Okay, I'm done.
Thanks, Sarah. That was super interesting. I have a question for David, who I know has to go because he has a train to catch, and that is not a lie. It's not an excuse. If anyone has questions right now with regards to the US, please jump in before we go to Stefan. One of the ones I've just seen in the Q&A is about SATs, David. Do people still have to sit SATs? Because I get asked this all the time.
Yeah, so it's a really good insight into the complexities of the US beyond just what I talked about, in that the first thing is that you've got two tests, the SAT and the ACT. ACT is not as well known as perhaps it should be. They're equally accepted everywhere. So the first thing is, well, there are two tests and you have to figure out which one you're best suited to. And then within that, we've got 3 different policies across universities. So there's no consistency. Some universities say you must have a test. So for example, MIT, you have to have a test for. Georgetown, same. Some universities say, if you've got one, we're not looking at it. Doesn't matter how good it is, we won't look at it. They're called test blind. So for example, the whole University of California system, like UCLA, Cal Berkeley, you don't need one. Then there's a third pool, which is test optional, where we'll look at it if you send it to us, but you don't have to send it to us. And so do I need to test, and should I test, and is it going to help me or hinder me if I do? And if I got the score, do I send it? It's extraordinarily complicated in there. And this is why starting early is so important, because until you have the list of universities, and then we have a sense of your own pitch to those universities, I can't answer the question of should you test or not. And so it's just an insight. If that, what seems like a simple question is, do I need to take a test or not? It's taken me 30 seconds to explain as simply as I can do. Then it shows that how bigger questions about the US are even more complicated.
Great, David, thank you so much. I can't see any other specific.
Well, I'll say I'm available to stick on for another 10 minutes or so. So if anyone's got US specific questions, put them in the Q&A and I'll try to answer those by text.
Great. Okay, thanks, David. So now, last but not least, I'm going to hand over to Stefan, who's going to talk all about the wonderful universities of Australia and its sunny climes. Stefan, thank you so much for waiting, and look forward to hearing about this.
Pleasure. Thank you, Tess. So yeah, listening to all the others, and I've sat through many presentations. Australia is probably the most straightforward. It's certainly much more like the Canadian system that David talked about earlier, in that it's much more transparent, it's much more straightforward. So the Australian education system is based on the UK model. So that means that degrees in most cases will be the same length as in the UK. So your general degrees, so Bachelor of Arts, Science, Bachelor of Commerce, will be 3 years in length. Couple of exceptions, physiotherapy and education, which are an additional year. And in Australia, there's lots and lots of different options to actually study double degrees. So again, as David talked about earlier, with the flexibility of programs, there is a huge amount of flexibility, not as flexible as the US system, for a student to be able to, what I say, kind of create a degree that is quite unique to them. And it's a way of either continuing with something they've enjoyed at school, or certainly to pick up some new interests, as long as they have the subject prerequisites to get on to those programs. So yeah, double degrees, essentially a student would graduate with 2 separate bachelor degrees. So some common or more common combinations would be a Bachelor of Science with a Bachelor of Law, Bachelor of Commerce with a Bachelor of Design, or Bachelor of Economics with a Bachelor of Arts. There's a slide shortly that I will that explains it better in visual terms, in terms of how the structure of an Australia degree sits. So in terms of when we're looking at the elite universities in Australia, they are what is called the Group of 8. So a bit like the Russell Group in the UK. So those research intensive, prestigious universities, University of Sydney, University of Melbourne, probably being the 2 most known within and outside of Australia. So a couple of things that you will that you'll want to hear. So globally recognized degrees. So if you have, I have a number of students who will go to Australia, study an undergraduate degree, and then they'll apply to universities all over the world for postgraduate programs. So it's absolutely recognized globally, and excellent recognition of professional programs. So I work with a number of students who apply for veterinary medicine in Australia, which allows them then, once they've graduated, to practice all over Australia, New Zealand, UK, through accreditation with the Royal College of Veterinary Surgeons, and also many Asian countries, such as Hong Kong and Singapore, again, through that UK accreditation of the Royal College of Veterinary Surgeons. A number of them do also allow graduates to sit the North American veterinary exam as well. So yeah, we work with a lot of students looking at things, those harder to get onto programs, such as veterinary and medicine, plus a few others, physiotherapy and psychology, things like that. So yeah, there's excellent recognition throughout the world with those professional programs. The other thing, I guess, that again is going to be slightly different to certainly the UK and the US, is how achievable the entry requirements are. So when you look at entry requirements for those elite, those top universities in Australia, you might notice for those general degrees that entry requirements are a little lower than comparable degrees in other parts of the world. Basically, there are more places available. So there's not the competition that you might see in other countries elsewhere in the world. So giving you a couple of examples here. So University of Melbourne, currently the highest ranked university in Australia. A Bachelor of Arts there would be BBC, A-level 31 at IB or equivalent. And a Bachelor of Commerce would be ABB, 35 at IB or equivalent. So yeah, as you'll see, quite achievable entry for fairly prestigious universities. When it comes to things like medicine, dentistry, and veterinary, they are quota programs, so they are going to require additional tests. They require interviews. We always have been very successful with securing admission for those types of students, and obviously, yeah, a lot of it is going to depend on how many places there are on particular programs. And certainly when we're looking at medicine, there is a university that only has 5 places for international students, and there's another one that has 80. So better off in a lot of cases applying for those programs or those universities which have a larger number of places for those programs. Australia, I guess I get asked the question a lot of the probably more often than not is what is the best university for this? And everyone this morning, this afternoon, this evening has talked about finding the right fit. And I think that's what we all try to do when we're working with students and families, is finding that right fit. And based on so many different factors. So yeah, going back to kind of, what is the best university? Yeah, I'm sure we'd all agree is the best university is the best university for a particular student. But there are certain subjects in Australia that do very much shine and are arguably some of the best places in the world to study it. So things like marine biology. I mean, you've got a university in northern Queensland called James Cook, which they've got a research centre on the Great Barrier Reef. They've got their own ship, they've got their own seaplane. It's arguably one of the best places in the world to study that program. It attracts the best academics from all over the world. Sport programs, Australia is frustratingly very good when it comes to sport. They put a lot of money into that. I've got a slide shortly which looks at sport rankings, and you'll see how well a number of the universities do rank within sport-related programs. Things like mining engineering, you've got an amazing offering in Western Australia. Western Australia often described as a big quarry. There is a mining town called Kalgoorlie where you can study a Bachelor of Mining Engineering through Curtin University. So I think it's 100% employment rate at graduation because you are living and breathing and working and studying within a working in a very large mining town. Next slide, please, Tess. So in terms of the application process, as I've already said earlier, it is a fairly straightforward process. They are looking, in most cases, certainly for those general degrees, just at your academics. So if applying before your results, they want to see your predicted grades from your school. No additional tests unless it's for those programs we talked about, so medicine, dentistry, vet, or if it's for a program that requires a portfolio, so dramatic art, fine art, and programs such as that. Quick turnaround on applications. So typically you're looking at a turnaround of about 4 to 6 weeks. If you apply before getting your results, that would then be conditional on meeting those the grades that the universities have set. And obviously you can apply to Australia in addition to a number of other countries if you wanted to. There is no necessary strict deadline for those general programs, unless, again, we're looking at those quota programs. But we would always advise getting in fairly early, so looking to apply somewhere between December and Easter, so between December and April, prior to university starting over there. So the university main intake is February. So we're looking at so if I've got students now applying for February 2025, I would want to see their applications in the next 3 or 4 months. Large number of scholarships. Look, I've been doing this for 20 years, and I guess as a result of COVID, obviously Australia closed their doors completely for 2 years. So the scholarship pot has got a little bit bigger, which is great for students applying at the moment, and it means that there are a lot more scholarships available than I've ever known. So in most cases, the universities will automatically assess scholarships. And just to give you, a couple of examples of what's out there at the moment. So 50% scholarship at Bond University, which is a very small private university on the Gold Coast. You're looking at about a AAB or an IB of 38, so quite achievable to reach that 50%. And then University of Melbourne does have a 100% scholarship for very academically strong students. So I can certainly advise on those. options to stay afterwards. You can work while you're studying, and you can also apply for a post-study work visa at the end. That may then turn into you know, a more permanent visa if that's the route you are looking for. And obviously, Henley and Partners will be able to advise on that. And the last thing to say, yeah, direct flights from all over the world, including London now. So London to Perth in about 16 hours, London to Sydney next year, slightly more than 16 hours. I'm not sure how I feel about that one. But yeah, great transport network throughout the whole country. So thank you for listening. Any questions, please feel free to pop them over. Don't worry about that, Tess. We can move on from there.
Thanks, Stefan. I am so
Maybe just leave the last slide for rankings, just so people can.
Let's put this up, because this is my fault. I mean, there are still a lot of people in. Come on, work slide. Here we go. There are still remarkably a lot of people listening. So this is obviously as informative as I thought it would be. David's had to go. I do have a couple of questions here. One for Sarah. I'm assuming if Johan is in the background, if we have enough time just to carry on. There are a couple of questions. Stefan, what about engineering courses in Australia? This is coming from one listener.
Okay, so yeah, engineering programs. Look, they are going to be more competitive than the general programs, but again, as long as you are meeting the entry requirements, and they will vary massively depending on university to university. There are lots of different options. I mean, engineering, like I said, you know, Australia described as a big quarry. It's a great country to both study and then ultimately to work as an engineer in Australia, and particularly in that kind of in the resources, you know, mining engineering, petroleum engineering, very, very strong employment outcomes. So yeah, they are very achievable to get onto those kinds of programs. 4-year program in Australia.
Brilliant. Okay, thanks, Stefan. Now, there was another question that I think we do have time to answer. Sarah, if you have got the time, somebody reached out to me and asked if you could elaborate more on an example of a research paper and what an independent learner is, if I've understood the question properly.
Yeah, of course. So when I say that students could read research papers as part of their subject research or exploration, I mean genuinely things like experiments. So, you know, scientific research papers. So if you want to talk about a recent experiment, something that has happened within the world of chemical engineering or chemistry or biology or whatever it is, find the research paper that was written on that experimental piece of research. So there are repositories for academic papers like that, such as JSTOR, even Google Scholar. So those are the sorts of things that we can obviously help you find. That's just taking things to the next level, rather than just accepting that a piece of research was done, an experiment was done. We only find the actual research paper that describes that experiment. Independent study, I mean, I'm not quite sure entirely which part of the presentation. So I think I talked about independent study in 2 areas. One was independent study at Oxford and Cambridge, where you are sent away to go and do lots of work. Doesn't mean you're not taught anything. It really doesn't. Please don't worry. You will have lectures, you will have tutorials, and you will have supervisions. Oxford and Cambridge, those are interchangeable. Those are the same thing, but they just have different nomenclature. And those are intensive sort of tutor to maybe 3 students, maybe 4, discussing topics. But other than that, you are, certainly in the arts and humanities, you are expected to go and do a lot of work in the library of reading and researching for yourself. In STEM subjects, in science and engineering, there is less independent work because there is a need for actual practical work. And for safety reasons, that generally needs to be with a tutor. So that's what I meant by that sort of independent study at university. Independent study in terms of your preparation for your application. I mean work that you do because you want to do it, guided by someone like myself, of course, if you require that. But I mean independent of your school. So not your school curriculum, not part of the curriculum, and not from a teacher saying, everybody should read this book. hope that clarifies.
Yeah, that's great. That's really useful. Stefan, I've got more questions for you. Do Australian unis have strong soccer programs? And do they have a sort of structured college league? And then are there soccer and sports scholarships? Because you mentioned scholarships earlier.
Okay, I'll start with the sports scholarships. Unfortunately, there are no scholarships available to international students within sport. You might see that some of the universities list that they do have them. I don't call them scholarships because they are generally money towards kit, or they might be a sports scholarship, but they have to have exactly the same academic requirements for the academic scholarship. So my response would always be there aren't any sports scholarships at all. In terms of soccer, look, soccer is certainly increasing as a sport. I'm actually working with a student at the moment who plays for Luxembourg actually, and so yeah, there are in a lot of cases, and I guess unlike the US, sports tend to be more of a club outside of the university. I mean, there will be clubs within the university as well, but they quite often would be a member of a club outside, which would tend to be at a higher level than certainly the university sports team. But yeah, certainly soccer has increased massively in Australia, and you know, there are some universities that are going to be stronger than others. And when we're looking at sport generally, I work with a lot of students who play rugby union, which is important that they have to go to certain parts of Australia because in most cases it's rugby league or it's Aussie rules in most parts of Australia. So we have to be a little bit careful about which university students are choosing for their particular sport. Did that answer all the questions?
I think it did.
Yes,
I think
okay.
it did. And I think I don't have any others. Do I have any others? I think, hold on a minute. Just one last question, since we have league tables in front of us. Somebody came in earlier and asked about the importance of league tables. You know, I know we talk about it. Our parents mention well-ranked universities. Sarah, Stefan, what are your opinions on league tables for UK and Australia and in general?
Sarah, do you want me to go to start? I mean, look, my view on league tables is there's lots of them, and every university seems to be ranked for lots of different things. So like I said earlier, finding the right fit, by all means, use rankings as part of your decision making, but don't let that be everything you're looking at. When you're looking at rankings, please look at all of the rankings that are out there and look at subject rankings. And you know, as I said earlier, you know, something like marine biology, James Cook University, absolutely amazing place to study marine biology. It's not going to appear in the top 200 of overall rankings in the world. So just because it's not appearing there, it doesn't mean it's the best. It's not the right place for you. So I think, you know, yes, it's important to use them as a reference, but don't, you know, I have students quite often who'll say, right, what's the top ranked university? That's where I want to apply. And that is not something that I would necessarily recommend. Over to you, Sarah.
I agree fundamentally. Yes, I really do. There are so many, and each has different sort of what's the word? Different, you know, they have different ways.
Criteria.
Thank you. Different criteria to set the rankings. And each one gives each of those different criteria a different weighting. So it is impossible to compare them equally. Subject teaching also, you know, as Stefan has just said, makes a huge difference. So you might have someone like City University in London, where people are very happy to go to study business, but will not be that happy to go and study most other subjects there. So because it doesn't feature very highly on the rankings. I put together a while back some statistics looking at the top 100 graduate companies in the UK. So the big firms like Unilever, McKinsey, etc., and comparing where they recruited from the most to the top ranking universities. And they were not the same. And you would imagine that they would have been, but they were not. They were not. So it really is fit. Please, of course, yes, take into consideration the global reputation of the university. So if you're going to go back to work at home, if home is Singapore, if home is, wherever home is, yes, is the university recognised there? That's important, of course. So,
yeah, no, that's
I think those, I think all of the universities you can, or all countries you can look at graduate outcomes, and that is so important. And yeah, I'd love to see your research, Sarah, on the the top 100 companies. That's great. Yeah.
Great. Well, listen, thank you so much. I mean, the Q&A we've sort of done as we've gone through. I think I missed out the slide of us all four of us earlier. Please reach out to me if you have any questions, if you have children, or if you are looking at studying abroad. Please, if you email me, we can set up calls with either Stefan or Sarah or David, depending on where you're considering. I will be in Asia for 2 months, from the 19th of February until the middle of April. So I'll be in all sorts of different cities there. So please also contact me. I'd be happy to meet with you if you are based out in Asia. But thank you so much for coming today. Somebody did ask when the recording would be available. I will say as soon as possible, but I know that the Henley team just need to get the recording ready to be sent out, and then anyone registered will receive it. So hopefully by the end of next week. David has now gone, as I said, he's caught his train. So thank you, David, in his absence. Thank you, Stefan. Thank you, Sarah. Ian got kicked out of Zoom. He's apologised. So I'm saying goodbye from Ian, and thank you for coming. But don't hesitate to get in touch if you have any further questions, and thanks for your time. Thank you so much, Stefan and Sarah, and we'll speak soon. Okay, thank you so much. Bye. Bye.